This is the murder of Kylen and Crystal. Moab, in eastern Utah, sits amongst some of the most breathtaking scenery. The Arches National Park, with its amazing sandstone arches, sits next to the LaSalle Mountains. The Canyonlands National Park is Utah's largest national park, with stunning views that span miles. Moab has become the hub for tourists and locals, and sees many people passing through as they hike, bike and travel around Utah. It was also the home to Kylen, 24, and Crystal, 38. Kylen was the daughter of Valerie and Sean Paul. She was from Vail, Colorado, and had grown up in Billings, Montana, before moving to Moab in 2016. Kylen had experienced her fair share of heartache growing up, tragically losing her baby daughter and her younger brother Makion, accidentally shot by a friend when he was just 15. Moving to Moab was a new beginning for Kylen. She was in a relationship and got a job at the Moonflower store in 2018. The store is a cooperatively owned whole food store in the heart of the community of Moab. The customers loved Kylen's friendliness and warmth. She met Crystal in 2018, but it wasn't until 2019 when the couple would begin dating. Crystal, the daughter of Beverly and Obi, had grown up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Crystal had previously been married and had 3 children. Sadly, Crystal had suffered from addiction issues that led to her losing custody of her children. Although she tried to fight to regain custody, her addiction battles prevailed. In 2016, she left Hot Springs and moved to Utah in an attempt to better her life. Crystal began to rebuild her life in Moab. It was a rocky road for Crystal, but she eventually began working for McDonald's and quickly became a valued member of the kitchen team. Kylen and Crystal would coordinate their breaks so they could meet every day at 11 a.m. After her struggles, Kylen was the ray of light that Crystal yearned for. The pair were clearly madly in love with each other. One of the downfalls of Moab's tourist appeal is the fact housing is incredibly expensive. Most properties are second homes or rental properties for travellers. Kylen and Crystal did what many choose to do in Utah and lived the van life. They had an old Ford camper van and a Kia Sorento. Crystal also had her beloved Harley-Davidson motorbike. The couple rented a storage unit and lived on the road, camping in the remote areas around Moab through the warmer months and switching to the camper in the winter months, waking up to the most glorious views and also helping themselves to save up money for the ultimate goal of having their own home. The couple even had a faithful companion in the form of Ruth, their rabbit, who travelled with them everywhere. In April 2021, the couple travelled to Arkansas and got married in a tree house, a beautiful location for the couple who both loved the outdoors. Through adversity, this couple had found happiness with each other. It was August 2021 when Kylen and Crystal had found a nice spot to camp. When you live the van life, there are many options available, from paid campsites with facilities to what's known as dispersed campsites that are free. There are always risks when living the van life, but Moab has a relatively low serious crime rate. The biggest problem is theft, which unfortunately goes hand in hand in areas with a high tourist demographic. It was Friday the 13th of August. Crystal and Kylen decided to go and meet some friends at Woody's Tavern in Moab. They spent a couple of hours there before going to visit with friends nearby. Whilst talking with their friends, they mentioned that a guy had set up camp relatively close to their own campsite. Given the size of the camping area, it was a little irritating for the couple to have someone purposefully invade their privacy. The couple then go on to say that this creepy guy had wandered onto their campsite in the middle of the night. The couple were laid in a hammock, so when they were not sure if the guy had thought they were asleep in their tent. Crystal said the guy howled, so she howled right back at him. One of Crystal's co-workers would go on to say that the guy was playing a flute. They told their friends that he'd been there a few days, that he'd left and returned with what looked like more clothes and supplies. They never mentioned a description of the guy or what vehicle he was using. The couple then said they intended to pack up and move to another campsite the following day, which was Saturday, the 14th of August. They would even joke that if they get murdered, it was the creepy guy. When Sunday came round, Crystal didn't turn up for her shift at McDonald's, where she was a valued member of the kitchen crew. As Crystal had discussed with co-workers that she wanted to stop working Sundays, they put the no-show down to a miscommunication. But when Kylen didn't turn up for her shift at Moonflower on Monday, one of her co-workers contacted Kylen's father, Sean Paul. It wasn't like Kylen to just not turn up without calling in. When they realised Crystal had missed a second shift, their friends and colleagues began to get a little worried. The couple didn't have a regular cell phone contract. They just relied on Wi-Fi hotspots to connect with people, so contacting the couple was difficult if they were out of range of Wi-Fi. Kylen's father, Sean Paul, lives out in Montana. All he could do was post a message to Facebook asking for help in locating the girls. He would call the police, who issued an attempt to locate. The couple had not been seen since Friday, so finding the girls up in the vast expanse of the mountains was going to be a tricky task. They hadn't disclosed to their friends exactly where they were camping. Law enforcement checked out a couple of campsites, but as the couple liked to camp on dispersed land, the chances of locating them was slim at best. The general thought was that they were having car trouble and were stranded somewhere. With Kylen and Crystal not having regular cell service, they might not be able to call for help. Moab local Cindy Sue Hunter knew the couple and also knew Kylen's father. Cindy Sue had owned an art shop in Moab. Kylen's father, Sean Paul, was the first artist Cindy Sue had commissioned in her store. When she saw the Facebook posts about the missing couple, she contacted Sean Paul to offer assistance. Despite having limited mobility and health issues, Cindy Sue felt compelled to help in any way she could. Early Wednesday morning, Cindy Sue drove to McDonald's to ask Crystal's co-workers if they'd seen Crystal or Kylen. She then drove up to the LaSalle Loop and began visiting campsites, hoping to find the couple. She asked campers if they'd seen the couple, and no one had. After 5 hours of driving around the mountains, Cindy Sue came up to a junction. It was either go left or right, so she chose to go right, and as she drove down the road, she spotted a campsite out in the distance. Turning down the dirt road, Cindy Sue spotted a silver Kia Sorento on a desolate campsite. She got out of her vehicle and approached the campsite. She could see a tent, but when she peered inside, it was empty, apart from a cell phone propped up against the tent wall. As she looked around, she spotted Kylen's rabbit, Ruth, sat in her carrier within a makeshift pen. Ruth had no food left and a little carrier was littered with mess. She realised this was the couple's campsite, but there was no sight of the couple. She spoke to Sean Paul on the cell, who confirms that Kylen had a rabbit and a silver Kia. As Cindy Sue looked around, she wandered over a dirt mound towards a little creek that ran alongside the campsite. As she glanced down, she saw what looked like a body in the water. As Cindy Sue tried to process the shock of what she was seeing, she was still on the phone with Sean Paul. She bravely took a second look at the body and could see that it was most likely Kylen's body. She told Sean Paul what she could see. He realises this is a dangerous situation for her to be in and tells her to get to safety. Cindy Sue flees to her vehicle and drives away, then makes the call to 911. It would take nearly an hour for law enforcement to arrive. They had trouble trying to find Cindy Sue's exact location. Imagine the fear and distress this poor woman felt, alone in the wilderness, waiting for help knowing her friends' bodies lay nearby, while Sean Paul waited with pure helplessness to hear the fate of his beloved daughter. Finally, law enforcement arrive. As they begin to process the crime scene, they find Crystal's body further down the creek from Kylen's. The couple had been shot and their campsite neighbour was nowhere to be seen. As the news of Kylen's and Crystal's murder hit the headlines, the community of Moab is in shock and disbelief that two of the kindest and sweetest people could meet such a cruel fate. Both Kylen and Crystal's families had dealt with great loss. They now had to process another loss, but are left with so many questions. The families had last gathered to celebrate the union of Kylen and Crystal, and just 4 months later, they're having to say goodbye. For Moab's police department, they had a double homicide to investigate. In large cities, police departments have access to a multitude of facilities, but Moab's Grand County Sheriff Department had just a handful of staff. They had only one homicide in the past 12 months. They're not used to dealing with crimes of this nature. The sheriff wanted to reassure the public there was no imminent threat of safety to the community or visitors, but no information about the crime was released. Seems strange that two women were murdered, no suspect is in custody, and they suggest there is no risk to the public. The crime scene was cleared so quickly that people had camped on the site just 2 days later, completely unaware that a murder had occurred on that spot. The media coverage of the crime didn't gain much traction either. This forced Sean Paul to put aside his grief and travel to Moab from Montana. Nobody could understand why anyone would want to murder the couple. This was a senseless act, and for Sean Paul, he wants justice for his girls. He set up a clue booth in the local park in Moab. For 3 weeks, he sat at the same bench every day, asking for anyone with tips or clues to come and see him. Although he generated a few tips, nothing has led to finding a suspect. A local private investigator joined forces with Sean Paul and is helping him with the case for free. The pair continue to do a fantastic job of keeping Kylen's and Crystal's face in the media. When Gabby Petito disappeared, the media focused heavily on her case, and in a way, this generated some focus on this murder case. Gabby and her partner Brian had visited Moab on part of their van life trip. They were in Moab on the 12th of August. They had a public argument outside the very business where Kylen worked. Although accounts are varied, Kylen was not at work at the time of the incident. Moab police stopped the couple later that day, citing a domestic incident, then separating the couple for the night. So Gabby went off in the van and Brian was given a room in Moab in a Moab hotel for the night. If you're not familiar with this case, Brian Laundrie murdered Gabby several weeks later in Wyoming. He later committed suicide. It led to a huge amount of speculation that Brian could have murdered Kylen and Crystal. This was later proven to be false. Investigators established that phone data excluded him as a suspect. Profilers would agree that Laundrie did not fit the profile for the type of crime committed in Kylen and Crystal's case. However, with the media and online communities trying to connect Laundrie to the murders, it hindered the search for the actual perpetrator. There was another person with potential links to this case, and that was John Freeman Holt. Holt was detained permanently in a mental hospital after he was deemed a very high risk to public safety. Holt was initially sentenced to 5 years in prison for a string of offences, including sexual battery and attempted rape, back in 2001. But the courts decided he posed such a risk that he was involuntarily detained in a facility in Arkansas. He told officials that if he was released, he would go on a sexual attack spree. In June 2021, he escaped the facility after shaving his hair and beard and posing as a doctor. He'd actually persuaded 3 staff members to facilitate his escape, all of which who were female. Their actions led to this offender being on the run for 3 months. One of them had purchased a motorbike to help Holt escape. He made his way to Torrey, Utah, 155 miles from Moab. Here, he changed his name to Jason Colt and even got a job in the town, made friends and assimilated himself into the community. Holt was so brazen, He even set up a Facebook account with his new alias. Although he had a place to stay in Torrey, Holt liked to camp in the wilderness. He even posted pictures of his trip on a Facebook group for campers. Holt was one of the suspects being linked to Gabby's murder and the murder of Kylen and Crystal. He was apprehended in September and returned to the facility. His cohorts were all charged with assisting his escape. Authorities have only released a statement that, at this point, they don't think Holt was connected to the murders of Kylen and Crystal, but his past history and location at the time of the murders certainly put him in the person of interest category. Moab police have released very little details about this case. All that's known about the crime is several key details. Both Kylen and Crystal were victims of a homicide. They had multiple gunshot wounds, either in the back, side or chest. They were found partially clothed. One victim had just a tank top on and the other just a bra, which was pulled up to expose the chest area. 4 spent silver bullet casings were located at the crime scene, stamped with the word Hornady. 9mm casings are most commonly used in handguns. A Samsung phone was recovered from the scene, but it's unclear if this belonged to the victims. A warrant was issued to check cell data activity in the area. Their tent was still at the site, as was their vehicle, and Cindy Sue Hunter noticed a collection of partially empty sports drinks bottles on the campsite. There was no sign of the other camper. It's unclear if investigators looked for tyre tread patterns to identify any other vehicles at the scene, or what type of forensic evidence was found and processed. It is unknown if the victims were subjected to a sexual assault and what evidence was collected at autopsy. Cindy Sue Hunter has later said in interviews that the campsite looked askew, that there were indicators a struggle of some kind may have occurred. Without any actual knowledge of the crime scene, it's hard to evaluate what type of crime occurred. It has been confirmed that the date of the murders was found to be the 14th of August, although it's unclear if this was in the early hours or daytime. There are rumours that gunshots were reported at 11:30 a.m. on the 14th of August, but law enforcement are keen not to confirm the facts in this case, only confirming an audio recording of gunshots was obtained in the AM of the 14th. There was a recent Facebook post claiming the couple were in Moab at a gas station on the morning of the 14th, where Kylen and Crystal had been for a ride on the motorbike. If this is true, then the couple would have driven to Moab, picked up the motorbike, gone for a ride, returned it to McDonald's car park where it was later found, and driven back to the campsite in the Kia before midday. However, the validity of this is unclear, as the couple told friends they intended to relocate to another campsite that day. Their campsite was located a couple miles away from Whispering Ranch, a popular wedding destination with a multitude of cabins and camping spots. There was a wedding taking place at the venue on the very weekend of the incident. This poses a major potential for a witness pool in the area that may have seen or heard something, but it appears no leads have arisen from this event, or at least none that have been made public knowledge. Back to the crime scene. With limited information, there are a few elements that stand out. Firstly, the tent was still up. Their personal effects were scattered around the camp, and their bunny Ruth was in the travel carrier. Whenever the murder occurred, it suggests the victims didn't anticipate a problem. They were most likely caught off guard. Secondly, their bodies were both found in separate areas of the creek. This suggests an attempt to conceal the crime. In other words, this likely points towards the suspect being the creepy camper, as the concealment was needed so the camper could pack up and leave before being caught. It also suggests this wasn't a premeditated murder. It seems more likely that an incident occurred that escalated to a point that a gun was drawn. To add to this, the victims had bullet wounds in the back, side and chest, suggesting they were attempting to flee the suspect. This wasn't a personal murder, and they were not shot in the head. The crime appears to be more of a frenzied type of murder as opposed to a more calculated kill. You would expect to see more execution style of kill if the suspect was a controlled or experienced killer. This killer left bullet casings at the scene. They clearly weren't methodical in their behaviour following the crime, showing a disorganised type of thought process. This suspect may have even been gaining some sort of gratification by being close to the couple or was watching them and reacted violently when confronted. Sadly, a large number of murders are committed when a suspect's fear of being caught ranks higher than the value of someone's life. As law enforcement did consult with the FBI, a profile of the suspect should have been made available for the police. Following the murders, law enforcement conducted searches on Crystal and Kylen's camper van, which sat in the McDonald's car park next to Crystal's motorbike, and the storage unit they rented. They found scales in the van, along with pills, and in the storage unit they found drug paraphernalia and what appeared to be drugs. Crystal was a recovering drug addict, and the amounts found were not in a mass quantity. Even though some were quick to suggest the murders were a drug deal gone bad, it's not likely, given the fact that we're staying in a remote area that even their friends weren't aware of, so the likelihood of the couple arranging some kind of drug deal in a remote location doesn't really fit well to the nature of the crime that occurred. Friends of the couple stated that Crystal had recovered from her addiction issues because she found happiness and stability with Kylen. The most difficult aspect of this case is finding the suspect. A recently unsealed document released by the sheriff's office showed an officer had conducted a vehicle stop prior to the incident. The man in the vehicle exhibited such nervousness and agitated behaviour, the officer decided against giving the man a ticket, fearing for his own safety if he took his eyes off the driver. This man was later identified to be as a strange character known to be a drifter and recently taken a job at Kylen's workplace, the Moonflower. When officers checked out his campsite, they found a blood-stained t-shirt, but tests confirmed he was not connected to the murders. The area around Moab is frequented by so many visitors that it's easy for a suspect to travel out the area unnoticed. The landscape of Utah is so expansive that the suspect could have relocated to another site and camped amongst other people without raising suspicion. The suspect could be from anywhere in the US and could have been passing through. The only way this person can be found is with the help of the public. Most travellers nowadays document their travels with camera phones, GoPros and dash cams. In 2021, 1.8 million tourists visited the National Arches Park. There's a very strong possibility that someone, somewhere, has captured something during the weekend of the 14th of August. Even if it was someone camped near them acting a little strange, there has to be someone who saw something that weekend. Crystal and Kylen's murder has impacted so many people. For Sean Paul, this is the second child he has lost, and for Crystal's mother, Crystal was her only daughter of 5 children. She has lost 4 children and now has only 1 son. Kylen and Crystal's friends also mourn the tragic loss of their friends, who were such a prominent part of Moab. They're all united by the fact this couple deserves justice. The couple's rabbit Ruth was rescued and fortunately found to be in good health after her ordeal. She has been taken in by a friend of the couple and now has a companion and is doing well. Sean Paul continues to keep campaigning for justice for Kylen and Crystal with the help of the private investigator. They are supported by Kylen and Crystal's family, who are all actively working to keep this case active.